The purpose of this presentation is to introduce you to the concept of strategy from a few different perspectives. In this course, we will focus predominantly on Michael Porter's ideas about strategy. However, strategy is a broad field and there are many other perspectives out there that can add value to our understanding. In this presentation, we will look at the items here, which included different views of strategy, the purpose of strategy, and a template for analyzing a company from a strategic perspective as it operates within an industry. Perhaps the most elegant definition of strategy is the briefest. Simply put, strategy is the alignment of the organization with its environment. Although this is a very general definition, it is probably the best definition. Three other perspectives follow. The next view is a strategic versus operations view. In this perspective, we consider the variety of business functions that operate inside the business. In contrast, we have a strategic view that takes into consideration the environment. So if we are accustomed to looking only at the functions of a business, we must transition from an operational perspective to a strategic perspective by considering the inputs and outputs of the organization in relation to its environment. It is the role of the strategic manager to focus on business planning and strategy for the whole organization as opposed to focusing solely on an individual part or operation. Mintzberg offers us another way to view strategy in terms of his 5 Ps: plan, pattern, ploy, position, and perspective. He defines these here. I will not read all of the words here, but it is interesting to note the differences. So obviously a plan is what many people think when they think of strategy, but pattern here is interesting because Mintzberg is talking about the idea that strategy emerges from a series of actions as a pattern, which is not necessarily predetermined. Thus, we must conclude that the perfect strategy cannot necessarily be produced ahead of time. There are just too many unknowns. A ploy is something an organization would pursue in order to evoke a reaction from another organization or competitor. Michael Porter will address the issue of position because he thinks that is critical to strategy. And finally, perspective is interesting because it has to do with how we look at the world around us and make subsequent interpretations. The next perspective from Carl Weick tells us more about that interpretation notion. Weick poses the question whether strategy or culture should replace the missing word from each of these sentences. These statements look very much like culture with the use of the words evolves, pattern, non-rational, values, traditions, etc. But as Weick discovered, the author of this paper used strategy in each of these sentences since it was a paper about strategy. So the point is that people's perceptions significantly impact how we define things around us. The end result is that we have a lot of variance in what people think strategy is. In contrast, Michael Porter is much clearer in his thinking about strategy. I would like to point out to you the glossary starting on page 211 of his book. This is a great reference so that you do not struggle trying to remember what all of the terminology means. On page 219, he lists strategy in the glossary and implies what strategy is not as well as what strategy is. As indicated on page 219, strategy is a set of integrated choices that define how you will achieve superior performance in the face of competition. I want to emphasize his use of the word performance because that is the purpose of strategy, at least from a Porter-like perspective. This slide depicts the relationship accompanied by what we call moderating variables. So what we are saying here is that an organization must be designed to properly fit its situation, and it must also attain a competitive advantage in order to achieve the desired performance. So always keep in mind that performance, at least from a Porter-like perspective, is always the objective of strategy. We will not run this video here, but you can view it in the PowerPoint presentation at your own pace. The PowerPoint is posted following this presentation. The video gives you a brief look at Michael Porter, and the same video is posted in the menu to your left. So why might a strategic management perspective be critical? I'm from Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. The Bethlehem Steel Company no longer exists. The local newspaper editor, John Strohmeyer, wrote this book in 1985. He saw the problems way back then. Unfortunately, management did not see the problems. There is a statement in this book made by a steel executive saying that they did not pursue particular strategies because they were making a profit, and the attitude was, why change what they were doing? The steel company was dissolved in 2003, just short of its 100th birthday. My father, and others like him, lost their retirement checks in the process. Hope is not a strategy. Our objective in this course is to provide you with the information and tools to develop a strategic management perspective that will ensure success, as opposed to hoping for it. It is important to differentiate strategy from other words that we hear in business. As Charles Schultz points out in this video, growth is not a strategy. Growth is an outcome of, as Porter puts it, a set of integrated choices that define how you will achieve superior performance. Again, we'll not run this video now, but it can be viewed in the PowerPoint file as well as in the link on the menu to the left. Michael Porter ranks as one of the top strategy professors, if not top business professors of all time. He put together a set of ideas that held true over the decades and resonate with people in business. However, it is also the case that his ideas can be extrapolated to other organizational entities to include nations and states. He wrote a book entitled The Competitive Advantage of Nations, where he looked at countries around the world and what constituted their competitive advantage in the marketplace. In 2003, he came to South Carolina to discuss actions that South Carolina could take to improve its economic and competitive position. Finally, this is a model I put together over time to capture some of the more important features of strategic management and its contribution to performance. Starting on the left, you can see that first we look at the industry within which the company operates, and in doing that, we want to find out why some firms perform better than others. As we move to the right, we find that this has to do with competitive advantage factors. We will discuss Porter's 5 forces model in that regard, and also strategic groups, which relates to position and core and distinctive competencies. Then, as shown on the right, it is important to consider how to sustain one's competitive advantage. The factors involve products or services that are costly to imitate, valuable in the market, rare, and non-substitutable. So we will be referring to these kinds of concepts throughout the course. It's important to ensure that you are set up and ready to go with your Globus business simulation game. The key to success in the game is understanding the player's manual, so you will want to take a good look at that. Although we do not recommend taking this approach to the game, if you search internet, you will find a lot of people posting tips out there. We think you will gain more by doing your own thinking about the process and studying the manual than if you're focused on trying to game the game. There is a lot of reading in the course, but again, it's not the kind of reading that traditional textbooks offer, so we believe it will be interesting and enjoyable, but to the extent you can, reading ahead might be helpful.